Hello class, I hope you all have stayed warm. In this video we're going to be looking at adding color to our earth tone underpaintings. I'm starting out the video looking at my references. There they are, that's my setup. And I'm going to pan over to my painting. There's Robbie the Robot in all his glory. I'm backing out a little bit now and you can see the larger painting. Okay. I've begun to add color. Now I'm going to set the camera off to the side here, so bear with me while I set up the shot. I'm doing all of this on a cell phone. Woo! We're shaking the world a lot, aren't we? There we go. I hope all of you have managed the last few days. I know people's power has gone out. And that's happened all across the state of Texas, hasn't it? Some very cold temperatures have hit us, and we've managed to muddle on through. The Edinburgh Visual Arts Building over on Klausner has been out of power for the last 3 days now, and as a result has been locked up. And I haven't been able to get into my office in the last 3 days. I've been promising this video for some time, so I want to go ahead and shoot it, and I will try to get it out to you as soon as possible. So where we're at now is we've developed the underpainting. Most of you have sent me, or some of you have sent me your underpaintings with the earth tones, and they're looking pretty good, I must say. If you've not yet sent me an image of your earth tone underpainting, that is to say phase 1, right? That's what we've been calling it. Please do so. Do so as soon as you can. To those of you who haven't sent in a completed painting 1, the first painting assignment, I should say, first painting assignment, that's the value study. Okay, the value, warm and cool, value scales of a still life setup that you made of your choosing. 3 items or more. Okay, 3 is the minimum number. If you haven't sent that in, do so. Okay, the sooner the better. Don't be afraid to send something in late. Something is better than nothing. Now, let's talk about this painting. Let me get a brush out. There we go. You can see that it is still predominantly earth tones, right? Burnt siennas, burnt umbers, those mixed blacks. I mixed up a lot of black for this one. I made that faux green using yellow ochre and blue. But I've begun to introduce color, okay? Let me show you my color palette one more time. Ta-da! Yellow, orange, red, green, blue, violet. Okay, those are the colors we're using. Primaries and secondaries. Primaries are yellow, red, and blue. Secondaries are green, orange, and violet. And then, of course, we get tertiary colors, which are things like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, green, red, violet, blue, violet. Those are tertiary colors. And we're going to talk a lot about those types of relationships. Let me preempt myself a little bit. The next exercise, color mixing exercise, actually the next 2 exercises, will focus on color relationships. The first one will be what we call complementary color, and I'll get into explaining all of that as we go. And after that, we'll be doing what's called analogous color groups, colors that are like each other. And we'll have the next 2 assignments, painting assignments 3 and 4, will deal with these relationships. 3 will be an assignment where you'll choose a complementary color group. 4 will be an assignment where you choose an analogous color group to work with. And we'll still be using a still life as the subject matter, okay? So be prepared, okay? Get the colors you need. I'm still also making use in this painting of my earth tone palette. So you can see this earth tone palette's been well used, right? Umber, burnt sienna, burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, burnt sienna with white. Use that a lot. Yellow ochres with white, use that a lot. Grayscales, made use of those. Okay, so for painting number 2, we can still use the earth tones, but then we want to introduce color on top. All right, how to punch it up. The earth tones are a wonderful set of colors. You can do a lot with it. It focuses principally on value, and of course this idea of warm and cool, that is to say tone. When we get values with the grayscales, we can also get values with the earth tones. We get warms and cools. All right, we're introducing blue, ultramarine blue into our palette. That's one of the ways we can get darker values. We make blacks and grays using blue. Okay, that sort of thing. But as good as the earth tones are, they only go so far. Okay, you eventually reach a wall. You can't get it any brighter. If you add white, you can get some very high key, warm tints, let's say with burnt sienna. But it reaches a point where it's just sort of a pale color. And what do you do with it? Where do you go? How can you punch things up? That's when we can introduce color into the mix. Introduce color on top. Glazing. What is glazing? Glazing is a thin layer of color. And we can make a glaze by... I'm going to play with orange for just a moment. I'm going to make an orange here real quick. And I'm going to make a glaze of an orange. That means it's going to have a fair amount of oil. And I'm also going to introduce some of my solvent into that. And I make a thin coat of paint on my palette. I'm making an orange because I'm actually going to introduce some orange onto a little section here. If you look at Robbie the Robot, you can see there's some red already in there. I've done a lot of detail work, or a fair amount of detail work in the head, mostly using grayscales. And then there's these little buttons right here, and one of them actually has a bit of orange in it. And so I'm just going to use a little bit of orange to accent what's already going on with the earth tone. I had used a yellow ochre and mixed with the burnt sienna, and I made a warm tone that I then introduced onto the top of a dark gray. And now I'm introducing just a little bit of orange to accent what has been taking place on the area of paint already. Let me get some white here. I'm going to make a tint. I'm putting my white down on the lower left corner of my palette. You probably can't see that on the painting or on the camera. I'm going to make a tint of this orange. Get a little bit of white. Set this down. Mix some of my orange into it, and I get this pale pumpkin color. I'm going to use that. I'm going to continue to accent based on observation. There. Now you see how that stands out? I know that's just a tiny little bit of color, but you see how it stands out? That's what we're doing. We're using color to punch up everything we've built with our undertones, with our earth tones. If you look in the background of this painting, see the reds? That was initially a burnt sienna. And I set up several values of burnt sienna, basically to mimic what was going on with a fold. I have a red cloth as a background, or as part of the background of my setup. And this is where, this is the outside of a fold, where the cloth is receiving a lot of light, and then it transitions to a more middle value, and then it transitions to a darker value. Okay, and it was doing that to some extent with the underpainting where I used burnt sienna. I then introduced reds on top of that. I mixed up a red violet. I had a red violet, that is to say, a violet that had much more red in it. And then I made a tint, kind of a pink, okay? And I'm not really trying to make a fold of the cloth, but I'm using the values to create zones in my background. So I create a more dynamic background. Let's talk a moment about subject matter and content, because this keys into why I'm making some of the decisions I'm making. The subject matter is, of course, a grouping of toys, okay? But all of those toys come from American cinema, okay? Robbie the Robot, 1950s science fiction. King Kong, 1930s science fiction. Batman, who's originally a comic book from the 1930s and has seen many, many iterations in cinema. Character from Star Wars, and one of the most recent, not the most recent, but one of the most recent Star Wars iterations. What is it? I forget the name of it. You know, where they capture the Death Star plans. Not the first movie, but Rogue One, that was it. And then, of course, a dinosaur over here. We have the Rancor monster, which comes from the Return of the Jedi, and then a dinosaur. One could say it references Jurassic Park, although dinosaurs show up in lots of American cinema going back to the beginning of the 20th century. So what I'm doing here is referencing science fiction, okay? Specifically movies, all right? American science fiction movie traditions. That's part of the content, okay? That's the content. Making a reference to mass media culture, science fiction, fantasy. That's content. Content and subject matter are two different things. Subject matter is what the painting is of when you're using a representational mode of painting. Content, what's the painting about, okay? So, it's clearly about this type of, escapist fan fiction or fiction that really is used to comment on broader societal issues. There's a lot of issues that get commented on through science fiction. So anyway, I'm making reference to that tradition. Now, in terms of the formal issues of our painting, we're dealing with earth tones and we're wanting to introduce color, and we're using color to move the composition, okay? And let's talk about composition for a moment. King Kong right in the center. Look how brown he is. I'm going to use brown. It's a very loose term. It's umbers and grays, warm grays, blacks from middle to warm blacks, all right? Right in the center, very dark, all right? But within that dark, what do we see? Fangs, a little hint of an eye. That was done with white and burnt sienna as well, okay? Everything else in this composition pulls out towards the corners. Kong is facing the right. He's swinging Batman. Batman's moving towards the right. The back of the Rancor monster, all right, from left to right, which echoes the motion of Kong's arm, which echoes the journey that Batman's about to take before he slams into the floor. All right, we've got Robbie the Robot moving from left to right, occupying the right corner. In the lower right corner, we have our little Star Wars alien running away, screaming. What happens over here in the lower left? We've got the dinosaur. Most of the painting is moving in that direction. Okay, there's a pull going from center to upper right, or towards the right anyway. Three big elements moving towards the right. There's a nice arc happening here that pulls us back from the center over to the left edge and then down, okay? Color can function to help pull the eye through a composition. Let's look at some moments where color occurs. First, there's the burgundy background, that red-violet background. It's red, it stands out, but it's not so bold that it overtakes what's happening elsewhere in the painting. We have moments of red in the robot's head, a couple of moments of blue. Almost don't see them because they fade into the gray. There's some warm and cool interplay. That moment of orange stands out like a sore thumb with everything that's going on around it. Just a little dot of color. Down here, I glazed on some greens on top of the faux green that I made. I'm calling it a faux green. That's probably not its true name, but I'm calling it that, where I've mixed ultramarine blue with yellow ochre. I put on some yellow greens, some tint of yellow greens, some actual greens, and it works, okay? That sits up on top. I also painted his tongue red and burgundy. I've also introduced some yellows and oranges onto the claws of the Rancor monster, some tints of yellow and orange onto the teeth of the Rancor monster, a little bit of yellow on Batman's belt, okay? So I'm using color in select places to move the eye through the composition. All right, and that's the takeaway here. That's what I want you to understand or appreciate what's going on. Now, I've left something undone, and perhaps you've already seen it. I did it deliberately because I want to demonstrate to you in this video what I'm talking about in terms of glazing color on top of an earth tone underpainting. What I've left undone was the dinosaur head. See that right there? I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit so that you can see me paint this dinosaur head. There's Kong, yay! Now I'm going to move the camera. You see my big hairy hand right there. Okay, that's too much. There we go. I'm going to focus on this a minute. At present, the colors that comprise that dinosaur head are combinations of yellow ochre, titanium white, ultramarine blue, and some burnt sienna with titanium white. It's fairly dull. It doesn't stand out very well. However, it does give me a tonal base, all right, middle values that I can then use color as higher key values to punch up what's happening on the actual head. Now, I've got my actual dinosaur here. Ta-da! I'm going to keep it in my hand and I'm going to be looking at this this head for reference. This is actually a key location, okay? We were talking about the composition a moment ago, where things were on the composition, what the big moves of the composition were, and how color was being used to move our eye through the composition. That's an important idea. Everything's anchored by what's happening in the lower left corner. And that just happens to be the dinosaur's head. So I want to punch that up quite a bit. I want to have some good color contrasts, some nice color values working on top of this underpainting. When you do this correctly, what can happen is that color sits on top of those tonal values in such a way that you get a deep, rich color expression. Okay, you'll see the color just bring an area to life. That's when things are working well. If things aren't working well, and that happens sometimes too, you get a dot of color on top of brown paint. Looks like peas and carrots floating in brown gravy. That's when it doesn't work well. Most of the time, if you've been diligent about building form and space through value and tone, that is to say dark and light, warm and cool, when you introduce color on top, it'll just sing. It'll just fall in place. It'll be gorgeous, right? Some of you may have experienced this already. Some of you may have been bold enough to go ahead and move ahead in the painting. And by the way, if you've already sent me the image of the present state of your underpainting, and I've suggested to you, hey, this is working pretty well, looks to me like you've got a good notion of what's going on. Colors next. If you feel ready, move on. Okay, if I've said that to you, good. I hope you moved on. If I haven't said that to you, if I've made other recommendations, well, I think this needs to be worked a little more, then go back and work it up a little more. Develop value. Most of the time, if I recommend somebody to continue work on their underpainting, it means that the values need to be developed a little further. Some of you actually sent in a picture of your painting, an image of your painting, and just straight up told me, I think this needs to go further. I think I need to do more with this. Well, didn't do more with it. And I've responded. I've tried to respond in a timely fashion despite some of our hiccups this last week. And I've tried to encourage you to trust your own assessment. I wanted you to send in an example of what you've been doing. But if you don't feel the painting's there yet, if you think the underpainting needs more work, then do it. And the next step is color. Now let's talk about some technical stuff just for a moment. It's been a hellacious week. We had this winter storm blow in, power went offline, I'm locked out of my office still. So yes, when I get this video out to you, I'll attach a deadline to it in the email, but I'm not the deadline Nazi, okay? I understand the circumstances in which we all are laboring. So my deadline will be reasonable, and most of you have been good about coming back to me and saying when you've encountered problems and could I have an extension, etc., etc. I very much appreciate your open communication about such matters. I do understand the circumstances. We're still dealing with COVID on top of this winter storm, no less. We're taking a class that really normally would be face-to-face instruction, and we're doing it online. We're doing it, through email. It's distance learning. So there's a lot of variables involved, and I understand that. I send the deadlines out so that we have some structure and to help keep us all moving in a timely fashion. But, come on, I'm not unreasonable, all right? Be working, stay in touch, okay? We're going to get through the power outage. That's going to get resolved. We're going to get through COVID. That's going to be resolved, all right? I'm going to stay in touch with you. You stay in touch with me, okay? Don't drop out. Don't be MIA. Stay in touch. Even if you're having troubles, even if you fall behind, it's not the end of the world. We've still got weeks to go before the end of the semester. Let's stay on board. We're going to do as much as we possibly can. We're going to try to get everybody across the finish line. I'll do my part. You do yours. Okay? Stay in touch. Now, that being said, back to the task at hand. Paint. You'll see I'm introducing these greens. I've got yellow greens, middle greens, and a few cooler blue greens. And what I'm doing is I'm using the transition in value to create form. Now that's nothing new. Only now I'm using color. I'm using color values to create form. And that is a little bit new. We haven't done that before. So I've got my range of greens. I've got yellow greens, I've got middle greens, and I've got blue greens. And I'm making value transitions that are sitting on top of the value transitions that I had already made using the earth tones. Okay? The big virtue behind an earth tone underpainting is that you establish value relationships in the underpainting. And then you accent those relationships through the additions of color on top of what you've already done with the earth tones. We're not talking about burying the earth tones, okay? I'm talking about accenting the earth tones. Accentuating, that might be a better word. Accentuate the earth tones. I've already done a lot of work with the earth tones. Now I am accentuating that work. Okay? I need to make this eye. I'm going to use an orange for this eye. I'm painting wet on wet. I've got wet green paint underneath, and I'm putting orange on top. That's actually going to work to my value, to my benefit. Okay. Now, look at the dinosaur here. Where is he? There he is. Look, he's got red eyebrows. Red eyebrows. Okay. I'm going to paint those on. Wish me luck. Good luck, Mr. Lyles. We're with you. It's tough. Well, you can do it. Yay. All right. Here we go. Red. Now, I'm going to use a little bit of white. I'm going to make a tint out of my red. Tone it down just a little bit using a tint. Kind of an oxymoronic term. Now, I'm going to come in here. Nope. Too light. Let's get red. And I'm going to very lightly draw on the red accent of this creature's eyebrow. This is actually a good color scheme on this toy. Okay? We've got multiple tones or values of green, and some of the greens are very tonal indeed, and some of them are bright and yellow, and then those red eyebrows, those exciting red eyebrows. So whoever designed this toy, color-wise, A+ from me. That's good color theory right there. I'll give you a clue. Those of you who aren't familiar with complementary color relationships, it just so happens that red and green are complements to each other. That means they sit opposite each other on the color wheel. If I want a darker tone of green, I add a little red to it. If I want a darker tone of red, I add a little green to it. If I want to make a loud, contrasting relationship, I put them up next to each other. So red and green, my friends, red and green. Good, solid color theory going on right there. I'm almost done. Too dark. I made a red purple, red violet, I should say. Now I'm using straight red. Ta-da! I think his nose is a little flat. So what I'm going to do is mix up a high key yellow-green, high key value, high value. That's light, right? Yellow-green. And I'm going to get down here on his lips. Not bright enough. So let's make a tint out of yellow-green. There we go, that's better. Do that again on the back of his jaw. There we go. And I'm going to do that some on his nose. I want to get a stronger contrast. Let's get a little blue-green happening. Not too much blue-green, just a little bit. I'm going to put that, that's too dark. I'm going to put that along here. Look at there. What we're trying to do is take a color and use different values of a color and create form. Remember, contrasting value creates form. What is form? Form is the illusion of mass and volume. Fundamentally, here's what's happening. Value, light and dark. Color, right? Tone, warm and cool. On a two-dimensional surface, so we're dealing with shape. However, if we organize our shapes and our tones and our values in just such a way, we can create an illusion of form. That is to say, mass, right? And volume. We can also create an illusion of space. And when I say space, I mean depth of field, right? I can create an illusion that things are moving back into space, that there is in fact a depth of field. That's an illusion. The canvas is not actually deep. It's pretty shallow. It's two-dimensional. At least it appears to be. Physicists are screaming right now, no, actually it's three-dimensional. It has width. Yeah, it does. You're right. But in terms of our painting, the actual act of painting, we treat that as a two-dimensional surface in which we are attempting to create the illusion of a three-dimensional space. Okay? That's what we're doing. You could also make an argument that in painting you're dealing with time, 4 dimensions. You can't see all the painting all the time. You can see parts of the painting part of the time, and your eyes move across the surface, and the degree to which I'm able to transfix your gaze at one location for a particular period of time and then move you on to another location, I am thereby incorporating the 4th dimension into a 3-dimensional thing, or 2-dimensional. How about that? You didn't think art was as deep as that, did you? Well, it is. Okay. Look at that. Contrasting values to create the illusion of form and the illusion of space or depth. Look how much more active that is now. Remember, you can back this up a few minutes. Remember how dull it was with the earth tone underpainting? Look at it. Look at it now. Look how lively it is, right? And that actuates that lower left-hand corner so that it anchors everything else that's going on in what is, a pretty brown painting, actually. I mean, there's a lot of earth tones happening. When I get to a point where I'm comfortable with this head, which is not much longer now, I'm going to back out and let you see the entire composition with this lower left-hand corner activated by color. Okay? Mr. Lyles, how much color do I have to use? I don't know. I really don't. Each one of your compositions is different. You're going to show me your underpainting, and we'll decide what, if anything else, your underpainting needs. I'll make my recommendations. What we need to do is activate the entire picture plane. We need to have a solid sense of form. We need to have a solid sense of space, depth of field, we should say. And then color will accent that. Color will help develop that. Again, because the earth tones can only do so much. They can do a lot, but only so much. And then color comes back and punches it, makes it work, makes it sing. So how much color do you need? I don't know. How much color do you need? You got to think it through, okay? What's the effect you're trying to create? How do you create that effect? How do you cause that effect to occur? Okay? We're not doing a full-blown color painting yet. That comes pretty soon, actually. Right now we're using a little bit of color with earth tone. Now, where does this come from? This is a traditional method, or rather the method that I'm showing you is related. I won't say it's exactly the same, but it's related to a traditional method. And when I say traditional, we're talking about European painting from the late 15th century into the 1600s and really more 1600s, 1700s, and then up to 1860, let's say, 1864, 1865. So you get what's called Baroque painting, coming out of what was called Mannerism, moving into what was called Neoclassical painting. Neoclassical painting was 17th century. What they were doing was laying down a lot of earth tones, okay? And they were using more earth tones than what I've given you. They had things like, red ochre and earth green. And you had other colors like Naples yellow, which is a beautiful pale mustardy yellow. You also had rose madder, crimson, which I think was made from crushed up beetles from Egypt. You did have ultramarine blue, which was made from lapis lazuli, which came from Turkey, very expensive. In the high Renaissance, lapis lazuli would have been worth twice its weight in gold, just about. So they had color, but a lot of the colors we're using now, like these cadmium colors that we'll be introducing, that we are introducing in the color palette. Let me show you color palette. See? Cadmium color. Look how beautiful they are. These are colors that came into use in the late 1800s during the post industrialization. Okay, so the artist's color palette expanded as a result of industrialization. But what they were doing in the 16, 17, and most of the 1800s was laying down a lot of earth tones. Painting was predicated on the development of value, and then color was an afterthought. Color was the handmaiden of painting, to quote a rather male chauvinist expression of what color was to the painter in the late 19th century of traditional painting. Okay, so the French Academy, that's where a lot of this comes from, had all these rules about painting, and tone was a big thing, and value was a big thing, and they got a lot of good results. I'm not arguing with that. Okay, if it wasn't working, they wouldn't have done it. But after or during industrialization, 1860s, a lot of other colors became available to artists, and so artists started looking for new ways to do things, and you get French Impressionism. Ta-da! History lesson for the day. But there are principles that I think can still be utilized from a more traditional European approach, and that is really the understanding of value, how value can build form, okay? How tonality can build form. So this is just one method of painting. The use of earth tones to develop underpainting. And I will say this, a good painting starts with a good underpainting, no matter what your color theory or your application of color theory might be. You got to set it up. You got to do the work. All right? Okay, so let's back out and look at the whole painting. I'm going to pick up my camera here, which is actually a cell phone camera. Get my hand out of the way. And we're going to back out. There's my palette. We're going to back out. Ugh, that was too fast, wasn't it? And let's look at the painting. What is in the way here? Excuse me while I reset up the camera. And I'm going to pan the camera up a bit. There we go. A little much? Okay, so there's the whole painting. And you can see the green in the lower left corner anchors the red that is occurring in the background of the upper right corner. And there's little moments of red on the ground plane, Robbie the Robot, Tongue of the Monster, right? There's little moments of red and even a few moments of yellow that are spotted and orange, spotted throughout the painting. So color pulls the eye across the composition. This is what color is supposed to do in this type of paradigm. In this particular painting paradigm, you set it up with the values, you set it up with working out your warms and cools, okay? You use the earth tones. They can do a lot. Man, they can do a lot. And then you bring in color and you punch it up. You make the color be the exclamation point at the end of the sentence. You use the color to anchor a particular corner. And pay attention to your corners. Some of you have most of your objects occurring in the center. Hey, you've got 4 edges. You got 4 corners. That's a part of your composition too. Think about the edges. Think about the corners. Incorporate all of the picture plane. Use all of the space of the picture plane. Okay, so that's introduction of color onto earth tone underpainting. This is my demo painting. And I'm going to get this video out to you just as soon as I can get into my office. And we'll go on from there. If you haven't picked up your other colors that are on the list in the syllabus, do so. Especially cadmium red medium, cadmium yellow medium, and of course you should have your ultramarine blue already. Get those colors, because that's what's coming up next. Our next exercise will be dealing with complementary color. We're going to be making a whole bunch of color using just those 3 primaries. Okay? So get your paint if you haven't already. Get your canvas panel as soon as you can. Most of you probably already stocked up. And my next video, we're going to talk about complementary color. Okay. Stay warm. Stay safe. Bye-bye.